This story is about the real case of J.C. Dugard, 1991. It was a warm, sunlit morning in South Lake Tahoe, California, in June 1991. 11-year-old J.C. Dugard was making her usual walk up the winding road that led to her school bus stop. She was just a young girl, full of dreams and innocent laughter, her mind swirling with thoughts of the day ahead, school friends, summer plans, and the comforting rhythm of her quiet neighborhood. Little did she know, this morning was the last time she would ever see that world again. As J.C. trudged along the dusty roadside, a familiar whir of bicycle tires and birdsong in her ears, a car suddenly pulled up beside her. She had no time to react before a man, scruffy, intense, with wild eyes, threw open the door and snatched her away. J.C.'s small frame vanished from the street, swallowed up by a nightmare no child should ever endure. In that instant, J.C.'s world was obliterated. Her backpack lay abandoned on the pavement, a tragic monument to her innocence. The frantic search began immediately. Her mother, Terry, was consumed with panic, racing to the bus stop and finding nothing but empty air, and the echo of her daughter's laughter fading into the distance. Neighbors, police, and volunteers scoured every inch of South Lake Tahoe, but J.C. had disappeared without a trace, like a ghost swallowed by the earth. Posters bearing her bright smile and pleading eyes went up across California, turning the state into a canvas of heartbreak and unanswered questions. Every night, Terry would sit by J.C.'s room, clutching her stuffed animals, whispering prayers into the silence. But for J.C., the nightmare had only just begun. Her captors, Philip and Nancy Garrido, were not strangers. They were predators, lurking in the shadows of normal life, driven by monstrous desires. They took J.C. to a place hidden from the world, a yard of tangled fences and tarps that would become her prison for the next 18 years. In those early days of captivity, J.C. was forced to confront a horror she could not comprehend. The Garridos' home was a labyrinth of terror, where every creak of a door meant another moment of fear. J.C. was no longer a child with dreams. She was a captive in a world designed to break her spirit. Yet even as days turned to weeks and weeks to years, a flicker of hope burned within her. She clung to memories of her mother's smile, the sound of rain against her bedroom window, the scent of the pine trees that once lined her walk to school. These memories became her lifeline, fragile threads of light that refused to be snuffed out. Meanwhile, outside the walls of her prison, the world kept searching. People whispered about J.C. Her name became a symbol of stolen innocence, a reminder that even in the safety of a suburban neighborhood, a child could vanish in an instant. And so, the first chapter of J.C. Dugard's vanished life was written, a chapter of terror, resilience, and a hope that would not die. J.C.'s new reality was a nightmare she never could have imagined. In the Garridos' hidden backyard compound, J.C. was forced into a world of absolute control and manipulation. Philip Garrido was a man consumed by twisted fantasies, a man who claimed he was driven by voices in his head. Nancy, his wife and accomplice, played her own part in J.C.'s torment, alternating between cruelty and a disturbing maternal facade. They built a series of makeshift sheds and tents, isolated from the outside world, where J.C. was held captive. She was stripped of her name, her childhood, and any sense of safety she had once known. In those early days, J.C. would stare out at the blue sky above the tarps, wondering if anyone was still searching for her, if her mother was still calling her name into the night. The days blurred together in a haze of confusion and terror. Philip would appear at all hours, his mood shifting from manic kindness to violent outbursts. J.C. learned quickly that resistance brought punishment, and that her only way to survive was to obey. She was forced to endure repeated assaults, the kind that no child should ever have to experience. She was made to believe that this was her new life, that she was no longer the girl she used to be. She was given a new name by Philip, a twisted attempt to erase the identity she once had. But in the quiet moments, when the Garridos were gone or sleeping, JC would whisper her own name to herself, over and over, like a prayer she refused to forget. As the seasons changed, JC marked time in the smallest ways. A bird's song in the morning, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the taste of stale bread and water. She held on to the tiniest fragments of beauty, turning them into small, precious treasures in her mind. Even as the years began to pile up like stones, JC refused to let go of her memories. She could still remember the smell of her mother's shampoo, the warmth of the sun on her face as she walked to school. These memories became her armor, a shield against the darkness that surrounded her. Meanwhile, outside the prison of her captor's backyard, the world moved on. Posters of JC's face became faded with time, but her mother never stopped searching. Terry Dugard became an unyielding force, a mother driven by a love that would not die. She worked tirelessly with law enforcement, following every lead, refusing to let her daughter's name be forgotten. The years may have dulled the urgency for some, but for Terry, the search for JC was a daily battle. In her heart, she believed that her daughter was still alive, somewhere out there in the darkness, waiting to be found. And so, JC's vanished life stretched on, a testament to the resilience of a girl who refused to be erased. The years melted into one another in the hidden yard, a twisted maze of tarps, sheds, and secrecy. JC grew from a girl to a young woman in that forgotten space, the world beyond the backyard shrinking to a distant memory. Her captors forced her to live in isolation, cut off from every scrap of the life she once knew. There were no friends to share secrets with, no family dinners, no birthdays marked with cake and laughter. Instead, her days were filled with the endless presence of Philip and Nancy, the constant, suffocating reminder of her captivity. The Garridos crafted an illusion of a family life, a sick parody of normalcy. JC was made to care for Philip's every whim, forced to be both a prisoner and a puppet in the Garridos' twisted play. The mental prison was just as powerful as the physical one. Philip's delusions grew louder, fueled by drugs and religious fanaticism. He would preach about salvation, about being chosen for something greater, all while using JC's stolen life to feed his sickness. Nancy watched on, sometimes complicit, sometimes a frightened accomplice herself, but always a part of JC's nightmare. In that chaotic world, JC's spirit wavered, but it never broke completely. She found solace in small acts of rebellion, holding on to her real name, writing secret notes in her mind, refusing to let the Garridos' lies become her truth. Over time, JC was forced to become a mother herself, giving birth to 2 daughters fathered by her captor. The births were hidden, the girls raised in the same twisted compound, never knowing the world beyond the fence. JC became both mother and child, protector and prisoner. Her daughters were born into captivity, but JC vowed to shield them from the worst of it. She told them stories of a world they couldn't see, painted pictures with words of green fields and blue skies, of laughter and music. Even in the darkness, JC's love for her children was a light she refused to let the Garridos extinguish. As the years passed, JC's life became a delicate balance of survival and small joys. She raised her daughters as best she could, teaching them kindness and hope in the only ways she knew how. But even as she nurtured them, a part of her heart was always elsewhere, locked away in the memories of her old life, the family she hoped would never give up on her. She would often close her eyes and imagine her mother's face, the smell of her home, the feel of warm summer air on her skin. In those fleeting moments, JC allowed herself to believe that escape was still possible, that somewhere beyond the tarps and shadows, the world was waiting to welcome her back. In the endless cycles of days and nights in the Garridos' hidden world, JC learned to adapt and survive in the only way she could. She became an expert at reading Philip's moods, understanding his patterns of rage and mania. She learned how to keep Nancy calm, how to soothe her captors' twisted insecurities. It was a constant dance of fear and instinct, a performance that JC had no choice but to master. But even as she played this role, she never truly became it. Inside, she remained JC Dugard, a young girl clinging to the memory of freedom and family. Her daughters became her reason to keep fighting, their laughter and small voices a fragile shield against the daily horrors she faced. JC taught her daughters to read and write, crafting a tiny world of knowledge in the midst of their prison. She shared with them what scraps of beauty she could find, a flower that grew through the cracks in the yard, the sound of birds singing beyond the fence. These small moments were her acts of rebellion, her quiet defiance of the life the Garridos tried to impose on them. She told them bedtime stories of places she could barely remember, of oceans and forests, of kindness and love. In those stories, JC found a way to keep her daughters' spirits alive, even as her own heart ached with the weight of what they had lost. As the years crept by, the world outside moved on, but JC's name remained a whisper in the hearts of those who loved her. Her mother, Terry, never stopped hoping. She kept a candle in her window, a symbol of her unwavering faith that JC would come home. Each year on JC's birthday, she would bake a cake and sing to the empty space at the table, refusing to let her daughter's memory fade. For JC, those imagined scenes of home became lifelines, bright beacons in the endless night of her captivity. But even as she built a life within the confines of the Garridos' world, JC never stopped believing in the possibility of rescue. She held on to the idea that someone, somewhere, would see beyond the walls of her prison. In her heart, she knew she was more than the girl they tried to break. She was a daughter, a sister, a mother. And as she watched her daughters grow, she promised herself that one day they would know the world she had lost. A world where they were free to run, to dream, to be more than the victims of another's darkness. And so, JC's vanished life carried on, each day a quiet testament to her strength, each moment a chance to hold on to hope. The years that JC spent in captivity seemed like an eternity, each day an echo of the one before, yet each one bringing with it the faintest glimmer of change. Philip Garrido, ever the manipulator, began to let JC out of the shadows in small, tentative steps. He believed that he could trust her, that he had broken her enough to show her to the world. So in the early 2000s, JC was allowed small tastes of a world she had not seen since childhood. Brief errands with Nancy, carefully controlled trips outside the compound. To anyone who might see her, she was a young woman with haunted eyes and a hollow smile, always accompanied by her supposed parents. She learned quickly how to speak softly, how to avoid questions, how to protect her daughters from the curious eyes of strangers. JC's captors created elaborate lies to explain her presence, spinning stories about a broken family and a wayward girl. She was forced to wear a wig, to adopt a false name, and to play a role that felt like a twisted masquerade. But within the walls of her mind, JC never let the lies become her truth. She held on to her name, her past, and her love for the mother who had never stopped searching. Each trip into the world outside the fences was a test of her will, a reminder of all that she had lost and all that she still hoped to reclaim. At the same time, the Garridos' delusions deepened. Philip's twisted beliefs became more erratic, his mind a storm of religious mania and self-importance. He began to speak of visions and missions, of a higher purpose that only he could see. JC watched it all with a quiet, wary determination. She knew that to survive, she had to play along, to smile when he demanded it, and to hide her fear in the shadows of her heart. Yet even in this strange new chapter of partial freedom, JC never forgot that she was still a prisoner. Her daughters, growing up in the only world they had ever known, were her anchor and her reason to keep going. She nurtured them with stories of love and safety, with lessons about kindness and the beauty of the world beyond the fences. She taught them to dream, even as her own dreams remained caged within the labyrinth of her captor's twisted reality. Outside, the world continued to spin, oblivious to the stolen life that was hidden behind tarps and lies. But JC clung to the hope that one day someone would see past the surface. Someone would recognize the truth in her eyes, the silent plea that she carried in every glance. Until then, she remained a ghost in plain sight, a vanished girl who refused to let her captors erase her completely. The turning point came in August 2009, after 18 years of captivity. JC's life, which had been marked by endless days of survival and small acts of rebellion, was about to change in ways she could scarcely believe. Philip Garrido, driven by his manic religious visions and twisted sense of importance, brought JC and her 2 daughters with him to the University of California, Berkeley campus. There, he intended to seek permission to host a religious event. But what he didn't realize was that his delusions would finally betray him. On that day, JC, now a woman in her late 20s, her daughters at her side, was noticed by campus security officers who found something unsettling about the Garrido's presence. JC stood there, caught between the careful obedience she had practiced for years and the unspoken hope that perhaps finally someone would see her. She spoke softly, cautiously, giving answers that didn't match, her mind racing with the weight of the secrets she carried. The officers saw beyond the surface, sensing something deeply wrong in the haunted eyes of the young woman before them. The Garridos were summoned to a meeting with JC and her children, and the officers pressed them with questions. Philip rambled in a manic haze, weaving fantastical tales of missions and divine purpose. JC remained quiet, her daughters clinging to her side, the fear in their small faces a silent cry for help. The officers' suspicion grew with each contradictory word from Philip's mouth, and they reached out to his parole officer, igniting a chain of events that would shatter the walls of JC's prison at last. For JC, that moment was a surreal collision of terror and fragile hope. She had spent so many years hiding the truth, afraid that any slip might bring punishment, or worse, harm to her daughters. But now, with questions she could no longer evade, she found a trembling strength within herself. She spoke her real name, JC Lee Dugard, for the first time in nearly 2 decades. In that moment of truth, the years of forced silence were stripped away, and she became visible again, no longer a ghost. The officers who heard her name knew the weight of what they had just uncovered. The vanished girl who had haunted California's missing persons lists for 18 years had been found, alive. For JC, the realization that rescue was at hand was both overwhelming and exhilarating. She had endured unimaginable horrors, but she had survived, and now she was free. The world beyond the fences, the world she had dreamed of for so long, was waiting to embrace her once more. In the days that followed JC's revelation, the truth began to unfold in a whirlwind of shock and disbelief. Law enforcement swarmed the Garrido property in Antioch, California, unearthing the labyrinthine yard that had been JC's prison for nearly 2 decades. What they found was a chilling testament to the depths of human cruelty. Ramshackle sheds hidden behind high fences, a web of tarps and ropes that had shielded JC and her daughters from the eyes of the world. Investigators moved carefully through the compound, documenting each corner of the twisted landscape where JC's childhood had been stolen. For JC, the sudden onslaught of freedom was both a blessing and an alien world. She was taken to a safe location with her daughters, away from the horror that had defined their lives. There, she was finally reunited with her mother, Terry, who had never stopped believing that her daughter was alive. Their embrace was a moment of profound healing and overwhelming emotion. 2 souls that had been separated by a wall of nightmares, now brought back together by a miracle of hope and determination. JC's daughters, born in captivity and raised in an atmosphere of fear and confusion, were gently introduced to the world outside the compound. They saw, for the first time, a life that was not defined by fences and shadows. JC took her first steps as a free woman in nearly 2 decades, each one both terrifying and exhilarating. She had to learn how to exist in a world that had moved on without her, a world of cell phones, internet, and strangers who knew her name, but not her story. But JC faced each new moment with the same quiet resilience that had kept her alive all those years in the Garridos yard. The Garridos were arrested and charged with a litany of crimes: kidnapping, rape, and false imprisonment. Crimes that painted only part of the horror they had inflicted. In court, JC's strength shone through even as she confronted the people who had stolen her life. She refused to let them have the final word. Her voice, silenced for so long, rang out with truth and the unwavering power of survival. As the world watched, JC Dugard's story became more than just a headline. It was a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure, to fight for the light even in the deepest darkness. Her journey from a vanished girl to a survivor was a beacon of hope for families who still searched for their lost loved ones. And for JC, the long road to healing was only beginning. But she knew that she was no longer the girl who had vanished on that sunlit June morning. She was JC Lee Dugard, a mother, a daughter, and a woman who had reclaimed her life from the shadows. JC's re-entry into the world was both a rebirth and a trial of strength. She faced an avalanche of media attention, her name splashed across headlines and television screens, her face the symbol of both tragedy and triumph. But JC, who had been forced to live in the shadows for so long, chose her own path. She withdrew from the public eye, focusing instead on healing the wounds left by years of captivity and nurturing the fragile beginnings of a new life with her daughters. She understood that freedom was not just about open doors. It was about reclaiming her identity, her voice, and her future. In the months that followed, JC and her family began to piece together a sense of normalcy. The simple acts of daily life, shopping for groceries, taking walks in the sun, listening to music, became profound milestones in her journey back to the world. JC moved with quiet determination, fiercely protective of her daughters, and determined to shield them from the darkness of their past. She spoke of forgiveness, not for her captors, but for herself and the years she had lost. She refused to let the Garridos define her future, choosing instead to write her own story of survival and hope. The legal battles that followed the Garridos' arrest were a testament to the tenacity of those who had fought for JC. The case was airtight, built on the harrowing evidence of the backyard compound and the years of stolen life. In 2011, Philip Garrido was sentenced to 431 years in prison, while Nancy received 36 years to life. Justice was served. But for JC, true justice was not about punishment. It was about finding peace within herself and creating a safe, loving world for her daughters. JC founded the JC Foundation, a beacon of support for families who had faced the unimaginable. Through it, she transformed her pain into purpose, offering a lifeline to others who had suffered in silence. Her story, once one of captivity and darkness, became a testament to resilience and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her children. She spoke publicly in rare, powerful interviews, her words a message of hope for anyone who had ever felt lost or alone. As the years passed, JC found her own rhythm in life, an existence defined not by the Garridos' cruelty, but by her own courage. She found joy in the laughter of her daughters, in the simple pleasures of a world that had once seemed so far away. And though the scars of her past would never fully fade, JC Lee Dugard emerged from the shadows as a woman of unwavering strength. She was no longer the girl who had vanished. She was the woman who had survived. In the quiet aftermath of her rescue, JC Dugard discovered that healing was not a destination, but a journey that would shape the rest of her life. Each day brought new challenges and new joys, a chance to redefine herself beyond the tragedy that had once defined her. She began to write her story in her own words, pouring the pain and the triumph onto the page with unflinching honesty. Her memoir, A Stolen Life, was a testament to the power of memory and the strength of the human spirit. In its pages, J.C. shared not only the horrors she had endured, but the fierce love that had kept her alive. Love for her mother, her daughters, and for the life she had fought so hard to reclaim. J.C. embraced her role as an advocate and a voice for the voiceless, but she never let it consume her. She remained grounded in the simple pleasures that she had been denied for so long. The laughter of her daughters echoing through their home, the freedom of walking in the sun without fear, the taste of her favorite foods. She learned to trust herself again, to believe that she was more than the sum of what had been done to her. Therapy and the unwavering support of her family helped her mend the invisible wounds piece by piece. For her daughters, the world outside the Garridos compound was a place of wonder and discovery. J.C. nurtured their curiosity, their laughter, and their dreams. She built a life that was rooted in love and safety, determined to break the cycle of trauma and teach them that they were more than the shadows of their past. They grew up knowing their mother as a woman of incredible strength and unyielding love, not as a victim, but as a survivor who had refused to be broken. The years stretched on, each one a testament to J.C.'s quiet bravery. She found solace in nature, in the rhythm of the seasons, and in the knowledge that she had taken back what was stolen from her. Her story inspired millions, a reminder that even in the darkest of places, the light of hope can burn bright. J.C. Dugard's life became a beacon, not just for those who had vanished, but for anyone who had ever felt lost or alone. In the end, J.C.'s journey was not defined by the years she spent in captivity, but by the life she built after. She was no longer a missing child, no longer a prisoner of another's madness. She was J.C. Lee Dugard, mother, daughter, survivor, and warrior. Her story was one of pain and unimaginable loss, but also of resilience, healing, and the fierce determination to reclaim her life. She had been stolen, but she had never been defeated. And in that victory, she found a freedom more profound than the world could ever truly understand.